Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, one player we're each excited to see, one player we're nervous about. We'll see where we go. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons. Welcome in. Thank you for kicking off your Friday with us, making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available everywhere, including YouTube. So if you haven't already, hit follow, hit subscribe, get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer, get locked onto the Suns all off season long and beyond. We're going to hit a player we're excited about, a player we're nervous or intrigued to see actually get onto the court for the Suns, and then we'll recap WNBA All-Star, where Steven and I were able to have a bunch of cool experiences covering that here in the Valley. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports aren't quite what we want them to be, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everybody every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, joining me as he does every single week is Stephen Perjone Garner, writer, podcaster at Bright Side of the Sun and the All City Network. I'll let you kick us off, Stephen. We'll start on the positive side. That's what the people always want. Who is a Suns player, as we sit here at the end of July, just wondering about this team, wanting to see it on the court, a break before the Olympics? Who is a Suns player you're excited to check out in this context on this team when the NBA season starts up?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's a great thought exercise to exercise across multiple players on the roster. I'm kind of twofold on this one. One is an addition made this summer, and then another is a player that's a staple in everything that they're looking to do. So I'll start with the majority player I'm speaking to, which is Bradley Beal. I feel like I think I've firmly and emphasized in a way in terms of my communication with it, how much food has been left on the table in terms of the usage and functionality of Bradley Beal in the Phoenix Suns offense, and in particular in the half court. Bradley Beal is very much a player that's multifaceted, can be a 3-level scorer, can score off the ball, off of cutting, off of screening on ball, play out of the post, can play off the second side and catch and shoot scenarios, especially with the types of strong side defenses that Devin Booker and Kevin Durant garner. Can play off of closeouts with the best of everybody in the league, catch and shoot proficient. Was above a point and some change per possession in catch and shooting spot-up scenarios last season. I think that there is a great marriage and opportunity for Beal as well as opportunity for Budenholzer to kind of use Beal in ways that he's used Chris Middleton in the heyday of his time spent with the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think that's going to be greatly beneficial to both the team in this new context, Budenholzer and Bradley Beal.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I mean, we talked about Beal's role, I think, on last week's show or the week before, and I think his role probably should be the most different than it was last year of the guys that are coming back. And if that happens, like you said, I think that really bumps up the ceiling on this team in a big way. I'll go with Devin Booker, and I've been saying it again and again during this just the exhibition games of Team USA and the practices and all that stuff, but I believe it, and I think this experience will be good for him to just kind of get back to the basics, play a role, remind himself that he's that guy in a way, earn playing time, just sort of remind himself and everybody else of where he is on a pecking order, even of a team that good, by just playing basketball, letting his mind out of it a little bit, where you could really see him overthinking on both ends of the court this past season. I think that will be a nice reset for him. And I do think you would hope another season or going into a second season where he's thinking of himself as the primary playmaker, the primary leader on this team, if he is the type of player and person and everything that we have thought of him up until last season, I think a lot of us would expect that he will return to form across everything. And I say that the dude was still third team All-NBA this year, right? So I think there's another level for him to go to with this new role, this new off-court role. So I'm excited to see him.
I think that's an astute observation. A handful of them actually from you with Book. I also do. I'm very much of the same mindset that him being in a particular role with this Team USA roster, having to play consistently to that role, will naturally translate to things that he can take to his role with the Phoenix Suns. Now, naturally, he'll have the ball in his hands more with the Suns, but I think there's a ton of value in Devin Booker at his foundation as a shooting guard first, being able to still consistently tap into those things that made him an all-star level talent before he got the ball put in his hands on more consistency. And I also think that in addition to the offensive side, even more importantly for me is defense. I don't think that Devin Booker is like a Drew Holiday or Derek White level defender. So don't mince my words when I say this. But I do think that he has a certain ceiling to where he can not just be an average defender, but he can be an impactful defender. He's not lacking anything athletically in height, in size, in lateral mobility to not be a solid defender on the ball. And then I think something that we both hinted at and something I will continue to tap the sign on, 2023 playoffs, he's going up against the Clippers in the first round, and he's making all of these defensive rotations. He's not just making them on time. He's early. He's stealing the ball from the second side, making a closeout, Xing out with somebody else, getting in the passing lanes, screen navigation, keeping the ball in front of him. Like all of these little things, I think when he really checks off his boxes thoroughly, scoring 25 plus a game on efficient shooting, getting to the free throw line, and then defensively being a stock monster, steals and blocks. When he's in that space, I think is when he truly is knocking on the door of being a top 10 player in the league. But when his defense is not up to the level that I know I've seen it be at when they need it most, that's when he starts falling to the 15s and 16s.
All right. Who was the other maybe more of a role player that you had in mind that you're excited to see this year?
Yeah, Mr. Point Guard is me, and that would be Monte Morris. We're not going to speak on the discourse. I'm not going to do that whole thing. My thing with Monte.
No, you changed sides. You're all the way on the. They should have gotten somebody last year, and this. Yeah, we're enemies on this one now.
But nah, seriously, man, Monte, and with the way he's going to help to shapeshift the context of this team with Bud, I think the big thing, and I've hinted at it before when we spoke to his signing in the first place, was that him being able to play and pick and roll, the space that he'll be enabled with whoever of the big three is on the floor with him, if not all three of them. And in addition to that, not just him having space to play with, but if somebody does ultimately have to commit to a pick and roll, especially if they go trips left with the big three, and it's him on the right side of the floor and pick and roll with Yusuf Nurkic, what are you going to do as a defense? If you don't commit to that two-player action, Nurkic has great hands. The finishing is the finishing, but the opportunities to finish without extra help jumping over the help line because of who's spaced and trips left, there's going to be just one defender. And if he sets a great screen, which for people that didn't know and people might not have listened to me and you talk about it, Nurkic is an elite level screener. He's going to give Monte opportunities to get downhill and make that 2-on-2 play a whole lot more 2 versus 1. And if no one's committed, that should be wide open opportunities for Nurkic ad nauseum. So I'm looking forward to seeing Monte, how he's featured in lineups, how often is the ball in his hands versus how often is he spaced, and just generally how his ball security helps a team that struggle with turnovers, especially of the unfortunate, timely manner, a lot in fourth quarters last season.
All right. Over under on Monte Morris starts. I'm going to set it at 24.5.
I tend to agree there. I tend to agree.
So over?
I think it's over. Yeah.
All right. Minutes per game. It's probably kind of similar. Let me go 22.5. Over under minutes 22.5.
That sounds about right for me. I was gonna say it's around like maybe 23-ish. I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, it just feels like he's gonna be involved a lot. You think like if there's an injury to any one of the big three, that opens up a slot that he is a pretty good candidate to fill as another starter, depending on, I guess, how the other fifth starter goes. And then I think there's going to be games where he closes. There's going to be games where they just can't really take him off the court. It's if the shooting comes around, if the defense looks a little bit better, if he just is physically where he needs to be. Even if he's not the absolute best possible thing you could look for, I just think he's going to be one of the better players on this team. And at the end of the day, that means a lot of minutes, a lot of games, and a lot of opportunity. All right, let's go to players we're, I wouldn't say concerned about, but that we have questions about, that we want to see finally come together. Answers we want to have, basically, about a few Suns players coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. We all love sports here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We never want them to quiet down, but unfortunately, that is exactly what happens each and every summer. However, FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with the boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everybody, every day, all summer long. I'm looking at the Olympics. What do we have here? Gold medal winner. The U.S. is minus 400. That's not a very good one. Maybe bet on Canada. I believe they're plus 100. Don't even bother with the women's team. There's golf. There's swimming. There's gymnastics. FanDuel is already stocking up with all the sports across the Summer Olympic Games. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, also an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Steven, I'll start us off here. Players we have questions about that we want answered this fall on the Phoenix Suns. I'm going to start a place that maybe people won't expect here, but for me, it's Royce O'Neal. Coming back, obviously, on a 4-year, $44 million contract after the deadline deal last year. Younger than you would think, just given how many good teams he's been on, only 31 years old. And the first place you have to start with Royce is it going to start? Is that change that you and I wanted to see throughout the whole stretch run of last year into the playoffs that I think just like size-wise makes the most sense of building out a lineup on this Suns team? Does Mike Budenholzer pull the plug and put him in there in place of Grayson Allen? But also, kind of a step below that, we're coming off of a postseason where the streakiness of Royce O'Neal really came into focus again. It was a 4-game series, obviously. They got swept, but was 6 of 18 from 3, coming off of, that is a third straight playoffs where he just didn't make the defense pay. 7 of 25 in 2022, 4 of 22 from deep in 2023, and then again 6 of 18 last year. That's just not going to be good enough. And, over the course of a regular season, he will have stretches like that as well. He is a good but not great three-point shooter. So basically, does his improvisational offense and playmaking IQ, his defensive size and versatility, does that truly make a difference on this team? Enough to start, enough to be that valuable role player that they needed so much of last year in his first full season with the Suns? Or are we right back to square one where they kind of have to go to plan B or C with the Grayson Allen and less than ideal size lineup to make up for the fact that Royce isn't doing that? It's not such a big deal either way, but it will tell us a lot about what this team looks like, how they play, and honestly, eventually, what types of moves they might need to make come the deadline.
It will. It definitely will. Royce is a very integral glue piece for multiple reasons. The first of which is the latter point you made, he could very, very potentially, very likely, and very honestly, there's good potential for him to be a trade piece with the contract that he was signed at. So that's something to keep in your back pocket looking forward. However, with him actually on the roster, the big thing with him, I think, is the IQ. You talked about his improvisational play, playing and read and react. I think he's a very good problem solver, and he can also cause chaos with off-script screening, off-script cutting, understanding how to space, like little things like that, understanding of where help defense is and moving the ball quickly, not holding on for more than a half a second, the 0.5 offense verbiage. He's really good with those little things on the margins. And then defensively, he's always early with his rotations. Obviously, he can contain the ball. It's not what he was when he was in Utah, but he's still fairly solid there. And I think the other big thing with him is that he truly boxes out and he crashes the glass. This is a team that had bouts with not closing stops on defense and ultimately defending for 40 to even more seconds than 40 at times when defending for multiple possessions, and then they would find themselves in trouble. So he's a piece that I feel like will certainly help for the size piece, for the IQ piece, for the functionality piece, and how he plays around the big three and understanding how to play advantage basketball. I do think that Bud starts him for those reasons, and that'll naturally allow not just for him to have his IQ and all of his intangibles with the starting lineup, but also to put Grayson Allen in a more natural 6-player type of role, to where when he comes in, he doesn't have to worry about stepping on anybody's feet, question about where his shots are going to come from. When he gets the ball, he's going to be full-fledged and told to just let it fly. Let it fly. If you're taking 12 threes a game, we're operating in a good space. I feel like that'll be the conversation with Bud, and I think naturally that'll stem from having Royce O'Neal start.
Yeah, I mean, the more I like talk and think about him, watch him every day, just kind of look at the stats, big picture, he really is as close to Jay Crowder as it kind of gets. I mean, I don't think he's quite as good defensively there, but just in terms of what he does well and what he does poorly, if you take away the on-ball defensive toughness that Jay obviously had, the value of just having somebody out there who, like Jay, a little bit undersized for the position that he plays, but just, smart defensive rotations, veteran, high IQ player. Jay, I think, as Suns fans came to learn, was a little bit smarter moving the ball and making the right decision on the offensive end than he got credit for. O'Neal maybe gets the credit for it, but they're pretty similar in that way. Streaky shooter. You maybe can't play him 40 minutes in a playoff game, but he still makes your team better. It's just funny. But who's your guy? Who's the guy you're kind of curious, questioning, wondering about?
And then one more quick thing. You didn't omit anything, but it's the floaties. Big time floaties for both of those two.
Yeah. It was a year and a half later, but they got their J replacement, basically.
For sure. For me, I was kind of torn, honestly. Royce was not the player that I had for this particular part of our question and answer. I was looking a little bit more at Yusuf Nurkic and Josh Okogie. So obviously with Nurkic, he is at this point, he is the player that he is. Elite level screener, elite level rebounder, especially when he really puts his mind to it. The rim finishing is something that's always going to come in question. And just generally speaking, his impact on offense past just screening is going to come into question. I do, however, also feel like I mentioned with Bradley Beal, there is food on the table in terms of usage and functionality with Nurkic that could be tapped into more. We talked a lot about him being involved in pistol 5 actions where he's in empty corner dribble handoff scenarios and just playing read and react with insert any one of the Suns guards or elite level players there. Include Grayson Allen in that mix because they had developed some chemistry as well. And I think naturally you could add another piece, so that would be 5 total pieces that he could have a relationship like that with Monty Morris. So I think dipping more into his usage and allowing for the big three to play as spacers is something that can really add another true layer to this team's offense. And I think that in addition to that, Nurkic handling the ball in delay actions, whether that be directly on from the middle of the court or from the slot areas of the floor, and putting the opposing centers, the X5s, in scenarios where they're away from the basket, but they're also away from the basket and far from their traditional help responsibilities. I think that would naturally kind of incline the Suns to be a little bit more efficient with their finishing at the rim and also be able to create more opportunities on volume at the rim because you're pulling away X5, which means the best rim protector on most teams is going to be away from the basket. But also you got the ball in Nurkic's hands where he's optimized on offense and he's allowed to play playmaker and read and react scenarios, whether that be split cuts or them getting to a litany of other things off the ball. I think there's just so much more that they can get into external of the big three having the ball in their hands. And I think that's something that Bud is going to kind of open up the offense and kind of evolve their general process in this context. I think it's something that would be greatly beneficial for them too. More random.
Yeah, I think we just know at this point that Nurk, when he's on the court, he's going to be the second or first initiator. He just kind of has to be. I mean, I think because that's the best way to use him, the best way to get value from him, he's just one of those players that forces you to play a certain way when he's out there. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just, I think we know that at this point. So how do you maximize that? What are the best, like you said, interactions that he can have with other players? Who are those players? How do you build lineups from there? You know, things like that. I think the Suns will have a benefit this year if they want to. Part of it's not just with Eubanks being gone that there's more similarities just from like the first to the second unit, but I think you also could see Plumlee be able to play with the starters and have that make more sense now because they're fine playing Plumlee more minutes. He's going to be a vet who the starters maybe trust in a way that we saw, you know, in particular, Durant just gets so frustrated with Eubanks for good reason so many times. I don't think that will be there. So the trickle down with Nurkic becomes, well, maybe he can play more with that second unit, play more with Morris, and they can, you know, just have the flexibility that they didn't have before. But I think all the offensive stuff, there is meat on the bone, especially with more partners for some of those actions. My question on him, though, for you back is, what do you think? He played a whole bunch of different styles on defense last year, especially in that playoff series where I think the Suns just panicked and started doing things they were not comfortable doing on that end of the court because of what Anthony Edwards was doing to them, especially. But what do you think we will see from Nurk this year defensively? What's the best way to maximize him?
I think the best way to maximize Nurk is to keep him in drop coverage. And I actually was able to kind of speak with Frank Vogel a little bit about his evolution as a drop coverage defender. And one of the things that he pinpointed in the question that I prefaced with was Nurkic, his understanding of angles and footwork within that particular coverage, but also playing at different depths. So naturally, you think about as a template drop coverage, the opposing big is going to be somewhere around the elbow or free throw line, regardless of where the pick and roll is taking place. The difference is, and I'll use Andre Drummond, for example, because he's a player that spends a lot of time in drop coverage. However, his drop coverage looks a little bit different than Nurkic's does at times because, especially with those two being similar in stature and athleticism at this point, Drummond is able to get closer to the level of the screen. He'll just have a hand on the back of the screener, and he'll just take away that angle for a pocket pass or for a guard to come around and snake in the drop coverage. Taking that away and still being able to defend effectively while reverting back towards the basket in that scenario is extremely important. It applies a different type of pressure to where the guard's not coming off and they're just completely comfortable, not just seeing, but literally feeling space. And for example, for Suns fans, with Chris Paul or even Steve Nash before Chris Paul, if those two players are coming off and they can anticipate how you're playing your drop coverage, you're dead before they even cross and get leverage getting downhill. So being able to play consistent chess in that and also being able to trust his defenders around him, I think is important. They got to a comfortable space to where we were seeing Nurkic a little bit closer to the level and kind of using, they call it the stab hand, taking away that pocket pass, but also being able to keep containment and also not lose leverage on the person that's getting ready to roll to the basket too. There's a lot of responsibility in drop. It's not as easy as it looks and seems. And Nurkic is solid in it, but I do think that he can be even better. There's another level for him there. I think the other thing I'll mention with him, though, he got a lot of deflections last season, and I tried to make sure people understood his effectiveness in that he's playing a somewhat quote-unquote passive defensive coverage, but for him to consistently have so many deflections, I think he was third or second, if I'm not mistaken, if not first, actually, in deflections last season. I'll check that out once I get done speaking, but that's just something that he's effective at. He adds some activity to a defense that really lacked it last season. And then to my Josh Okogie point, though, the other thing I mentioned him, it's the shooting for him. If he hits shots, his defense is going to be too valuable for him to not play, even with Ryan Dunn in the mix. And the thing with Josh, I just don't see enough players that are going to be in the Suns' top 8 or top 9 that are going to consistently guard on the perimeter. And that therein lies opportunity for him to carve out a niche with this team. Naturally, he has to knock down shots because if he's not bringing that to offense, what else is he bringing? He's going to be a help point. But for his defense to get the value out of that, he's got to knock down shots. I firmly believe he's going to find a way to find some type of niche, maybe in like a 10th man or 9th man type of role potentially. But there's value and there's going to be opportunity there for sure.
Yeah, especially early in the season for Josh, because I think he's going to be ahead of Dunn in the rotation pecking order early. And, maybe at the deadline, if both Okogie and Dunn don't really feel like they're ready to be in the playoff rotation, then you maybe make a move and both of them get knocked down even further. But I would think Okogie has an inside track, especially with just how much they're paying him. If they want to trade that contract at any point, they're also going to want to give him an opportunity to actually look good and prove he's an NBA player rather than just saying, you're getting DNPs and you're just a walking dollar figure to us. I doubt they'll handle it that way. So, he's a good one. I was going to have Dunn for a very similar reason. Is he ready to play? And they definitely need one of those two to at least bring them something on the offensive end during those early season games. All right, let's close out talking about our experience at WNBA All-Star. The WNBA world, the women's basketball world, descended on Phoenix last week. Haven't talked about it too much. Waiting for Steven, who was also there. We'll reminisce, tell some stories, have some fun to close out the show. First, today's episode brought to you by the Gametime app, the best place to buy a ticket in the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer that it gets to first pitch. Maybe you're just downtown, maybe you're just killing time, and you say, hey, why don't I go to a baseball game? Guaranteed Gametime's going to have the tickets you want and the price that actually gets you in there without hesitating. They have zone deals, flash deals, last-minute deals, and more. But my favorite thing, as it always has been, is the seat view, a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You click through whether it's a concert, comedy show, theater show, or sporting event, whatever venue, whatever indoor, outdoor, it is going to show you, hey, this is the angle you're looking at. This is what's obstructed. This is how high up you are, whatever. So you can know what you're getting. That's what I always hate, especially if it's a venue you haven't been to before. You're just kind of risking it. You're spending a lot of money. You want to be sure it's right. Gametime helps you do that as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets from the MLB to beyond with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Steven, I think you have your hat souvenir on. Is that right? What was your favorite moment, experience? What has stuck with you these 4 or 5 days since you escaped Phoenix against all odds as the entire internet went to hell in a handbasket last weekend and you got out of here? What's sticking with you from WNBA All-Star?
What's sticking with me, there's two big things. The first thing being not just Phoenix having the All-Star game, but how visible, how accessible Matt Ishbia, Josh Bartelstein, and Phoenix Mercury head coach Nate Tibbetts were the entire weekend, in addition to their players just kind of being everywhere that weekend too. Those three in particular, such important decision makers with everything that the franchise is doing in terms of turning the corner and evolving, they were ever present. And I feel like anybody that tapped in with W All-Star Weekend, if they knew those three by their faces, they could definitely say they brushed shoulders or were in the same space as those three multiple times over the weekend. And then the other big thing for me, first, it's kind of twofold. Arike Ogunbowale, 34 points in the second half, and really kicking the door down and leaving it closed after she kicked it down on the Olympic team. And the purpose it serves in their process and understanding that they have to get to a level that they were not at in that game a lot quicker than they probably perceived that they needed to be. So being a kind of a reality check for them, but also the moment for Arike, a player that doesn't have the nicest things mentioned about her play style. But the things that are undeniable about her, for one, she is the best tough shot maker in the W, bar none. And in addition to that, she's also the loudest bucket getter. Like, her buckets just hit differently because of the ways in which she can score. There's literally no way that she can't score on the floor. And I think that it was important for her to have that moment, especially after everything news-wise that came out about her not being with the Olympic team again. And then having that response to it in a prompt kind of time on task type of manner, like, you sure you didn't want this? Obviously it's all love there. She pretty much elocuted the exact same thing post game, that it was ultimately her decision to not do it. But at the same time, I appreciate her just having that spotlight, because people kind of forget about Arike when speaking about the W as a whole. And I just appreciate players taking advantage of a moment in timeliness like that.
Yeah, it was very cool for her. Hopefully that team gets back on track the second half of the year and she can make it back to the playoffs. She has done a lot to improve her efficiency within that style of play the past couple years before this one, and she's just back in a situation now where she kind of has to do too much. So hopefully that changes when her team gets healthy and she's back in a good situation. But yeah, it was an awesome weekend. I mean, I think it's almost like, I don't even mean this as a negative, but Madishby is in this honeymoon period as an owner where he can kind of do no wrong. But in this case, he really did come through. Like, it really genuinely was as good as all the hype around it was. It wasn't just like, I'm spending money, so I'm going to get a pat on the back. You know what I mean? Like, they worked with the city to have signage and all this stuff to make it really feel like an event in a way that they could have just not done and said, hey, buy tickets, come down, we'll see you there, whatever, it doesn't matter, to have it all be so kind of built up around Diana as somewhat of a send-off with the practice facility opening and the dedication of the courts. And, obviously she's very humble, so the media, attention wasn't quite what it could have been because she doesn't want to talk about it and people are deferential to that. But I thought it was all done with a lot of thoughtfulness and legit hype and investment and whatever, and then the game delivered. So that's all you can really ask for, and it feels like WNBA All-Star is finally to a point with the WNBA Live thing that was at the convention center and all these different branded events and live shows and everything, that it feels like it's like really big time now and up there with any other leagues All-Star, mid-season, whatever, in a way that, it wasn't even, the first one I went to in Vegas was not even close to this 5 years ago. And to see that change has been really cool. But I think Phoenix deserves a shout out for being one of the stepping stones toward getting it there. You had something on the arena as well. I think we talked about this the last time you came to Phoenix, but you gotta describe to people why you like our arena so much. Because I was telling you, I haven't been to many. So I've been there and I've been to MSG, and that is not a good comparison point to actually make any kind of a analysis on. What do you like about Footprint Center? What's special about it?
Yeah, the Footprint Center is very unique. So if you just kind of imagine you're walking into the arena, you're going through like the tunnel that the players and whoever else that's on the court walk through, and then things are like kind of opening up. And you start to like get a feel for the ambiance. Imagine there's people there like actually there in the crowd. There's energy from music and like the PA announcers and all of that stuff. The Footprint Center feels like very unique from any other arena. It's just a different type of like energy, like vibe type thing. And when you think about the people that are involved in this, as far as the fans and the engagement, I can't speak for the Suns part of things, but for the Mercury and how they engage and play off of the game. When opposing players go to the free throw line, the announcer the announcer announces that they're shooting one or shooting two, and their prompt response from the crowd is missing two or missing one or whatever, like that playing back and forth, the Mighty Mercury chants, like all of those little things, in addition to like the literal basketball court and the way that the colors of both teams kind of like pop off the hardwood. The choice in the color of the hardwood and how it kind of plays to the crowd, especially for the Mercury side with the X Factor pieces all over the place. It's just very, very, very unique. And for people that have not ventured off to other arenas, whether that be media or just fans, I want to kind of paint that picture for you so that you appreciate the type of home court and home court advantage that truly exists in Phoenix, because it's definitely unique from other arenas that I've had the opportunity to kind of travel around and kind of do a vibe check with.
Yeah, the Mercury game experience is more interactive than like any event I've really been to. It's very different, even to the point where for the All-Star game, they did a little thing pregame to train all the new attendees of what was about to happen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But okay, the Mighty Mercury thing, be honest, could you tell what was being said, or did somebody have to tell you?
No, I figured it out after a while. So when it wasn't until, so I've been watching the W for quite some time, but I've only been like actually covering teams in the W for, I think this is my fourth year now, fourth in a row. It didn't really click for me until earlier this season, where I was consistently watching Mercury games. And I was like, okay, so they've been making this chant for all these years. I was never able to piece together exactly what it is. I can't remember exactly what point it was when it hit for me, but it was like maybe game, like their first or second home game this season, where I was like, now this all makes sense. All makes sense now. I think I might have heard Cheryl Miller in like a league pass intermission. She was talking about like Mighty Mercury, and then I was thinking back, and it just like clicked for me. I was like, yo, and I was like, okay, now everything makes sense now. Yeah.
Yeah. To paint the picture a little bit, I mean, I started covering the team when I was like 20 years old. I was too shy to like say anything to anybody because I was just trying to like put my head down, act like I'd been there before type thing. And then it's weird because, like you said, it's call and response. So in my head, I was like, is that the same phrase repeated back and forth? Or is that something where one of them is one word, Mercury, and the other one is something else that the crowd says back? Like, what is happening here? Same thing. I don't remember exactly, but I would say it might have been my entire first season of being in person at games, not knowing what in the world was going on. But that's all right. I figured it out eventually. We're in business. Yeah, the missing 2, the missing 3 stuff, all of it's just great. It's cool. And yeah, I mean, the one and only time you'll hear me say this, but the one good thing Robert Sarver did on his way out was renovate that arena and make the wood and the lighting and everything else a lot more unique and, again, kind of big time. That arena before the renovations was in need of a facelift, and
so
we got
one. So I heard,
yeah.
and I see it too. I've seen the evolution. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, there we go. It was a fun weekend for sure. I hope that we have WNBA All-Star back, but if nothing else, it set the stage. It was a trial run in some ways for NBA All-Star, which is just bigger and crazier in 2 years, right? In 2026 or 7? I think it's 7 that we will have it here in the Valley. So that'll be fun, of course, and more people will get to go. All right, that'll wrap us up. Hit follow or subscribe. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday, all off season long and beyond. Read Steven, listen to him at PHNX and at Bright Side of the Sun, and we'll catch you guys next week.